Hello everybody and welcome to the biggest thing in sports this week. It's college football and it's championship week. We're going to start with the ACC matchup, number 9 Clemson taking on number 23 North Carolina. Obviously, Clemson the heavy favorite being ranked in the top 10, but hold on a second before you get carried away. There's some things you're going to want to look at with this Clemson team. Their best win was a 34-28 victory at Florida State, who's ranked number 13 in the country, so that's a pretty good win. But, however, you gotta look at their losses. They lost to both Notre Dame and South Carolina, the 19th and 21st ranked teams in the country. So they're 1-2 against ranked opponents this season, and both of their losses came against teams ranked outside of the top 15. So this becomes a big prove-it game for Clemson to see if they really belong in that top 10 or if they're more of a top 20 team. Now we look at North Carolina. They're on a 2-game losing streak to finish the season, once against Georgia Tech, and the final game of the year, the number 25th ranked NC State, ended in a double overtime heartbreaker for the Tar Heels. Their only other loss came at home against Notre Dame, again another top 25 ranked team. 9-3 overall, not a bad record for North Carolina, but they are the lowest rated 9-3 team in the top 25. And they're pretty banged up. Their starting running back and 2 of their better defensive ends are out for the season. That explains why they've had some trouble down the road here and why they went from a 9-1 team to a 9-3 team. Clemson, strength, their run game. 188 yards on the ground per game. That's good for 3rd in the ACC. Clemson's weakness, their pass defense. 18 touchdowns allowed through the air and over 226 yards per game. That's 8th and 9th respectively in the ACC. So that's something that North Carolina is going to have to exploit. North Carolina, strength, passing game, 320 yards through the air per game. And get this, 35 touchdowns. That's 1st and 2nd in the ACC. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup to watch between these two. North Carolina weakness, defense. 442.7 yards allowed per game and 48 touchdowns allowed. Both last place in their conference. Not very good against a top 10 ranked team. Basically, North Carolina has to win with great offense, whereas Clemson can win with just passable defense. So winner, Clemson. Also, this game's in North Carolina, so kind of a home game for North Carolina. See if that does anything for them. Still going to be Clemson, though. Pac-12 time, it's number 4 USC versus number 11, the Utah Utes. This is going to be maybe the most interesting matchup to watch because it's the most likely upset we probably have out of these Power 5 championship games. USC obviously in line for the college football playoffs after their win last week against Notre Dame. They defeated number 15 Oregon State, number 17 UCLA, and number 21 Notre Dame. However, their only loss this season came against Utah on the road, and that game was a really interesting one. They led a close game the whole way until the 4th quarter, where 3 consecutive drives to start that quarter ended with touchdowns. And eventually Utah was able to score a touchdown and a 2-point conversion with less than a minute to go, and they came away with the 43-42 victory. USC is also dealing with a slew of injuries, including their starting running back Travis Dye. Utah, on the other hand, they're 9-3 on the season. Their 2 wins, obviously one against USC, and their best other win coming against Oregon State. But the other ranked opponents they played were accounted for 2 of their losses, along with losing to Florida at the very start of the year in game number 1. They lost to Oregon and UCLA, ranked number 16 and 17 respectively. So you can deal with those 2 losses for sure. Those are quality losses, but losing to Florida is really what hurt them. All 3 of their losses came on the road. They were just 3-3 this season. So can they play well on a neutral site? Remains to be seen. But do they still have the magic in them? Can they win this game? Can they upset USC again? I mean, the question comes down to, are they 100%? 2 of their starting running backs are hurt, and a starting tight end, which really hurts their offense, one of their strengths going into this game. USC strength, offense. They're 1st in points, passing yards per game, 2nd in touchdown, and 5th in rushing yards per game. Obviously a great offensive team. That's why they're in the college football playoffs as of right now. USC's weakness, their defense, 405 yards allowed per game, and 28.3 points a game. Not a great defense to go along with that high-powered offense. Utah's strength is their defense, as I mentioned earlier. They're first in yards per game inside the Pac-12, and they're great against both the pass and rush defense. 20.1 points allowed per game. Utah's weakness, pass game. They're 10th in passing yards per game in their conference. However, they are tied for 5th in passing touchdowns per game. So once they get into that red zone, they are a threat to throw the ball to score, but getting up and down the field, that's kind of where they lack passing the ball. So if you're USC, you just need to stop the run, and Utah's really going to struggle against you, whereas Utah is going to really have to try and keep USC on their toes defensively, mixing in that pass game along with their run game effectively. Winner, USC. Now the reason I picked them, Utah may have a strength of defense. The thing is, their defense is only good for the Pac-12. They're still allowing over 300 yards of offense per game, whereas USC's offense is good for the NCAA as a whole, not just the Pac-12. All right, 2 non-upsets so far. Let's see if I got another one on hand. No, I don't. Number 2, Michigan versus Purdue, the only unranked team in a championship game in the Power 5 conference. The Big Ten, that's sort of how it's been going for years at this point. Michigan, one of just 3 undefeated teams, coming off their best win of the season at Ohio State, where they absolutely stomped the team that is now ranked number 5th in the country. They also defeated number 8 Penn State, and they were beating those 2 highly ranked opponents by 23 points in each of those games. So neither one was close in those top 10 wins they've had this season. That's why they're ranked number 2. And they just proved that they could win tough road games. They went to the shoe and won it for the first time since 2000. They were able to complete deep ball passes, having 3 passing touchdowns, go 45 yards or further, and they were able to win basically 1.5 games without their Heisman candidate and probably their best overall player, Blake Corum. Now you take a look at Purdue, and they've had a pretty good season. They're at 8-4 on the year, so they are just outside of that top 25. I think if you had like a top 30, top 35, you would definitely see Purdue ranked. Now, their first game may have been their best game in terms of looking at ranked teams. They only lost by 4 points on the road at Penn State, who's again ranked inside the top 10. Couple tough losses for them came at Syracuse and at Wisconsin, and then losing at home to Iowa. Now, Iowa, a really good defensive team, so it's not a terrible thing that they lost to them. The problem was how. 24-3 the final score in that game on their home turf. Not great for trying to be ranked, and that's why they're not. However, they were able to defeat Minnesota when they were ranked number 21 in the country back in the early season. Again, a 20-10 victory on the road. Pretty good for them. They also defeated Illinois on the road when they were ranked number 21 as well, so they were able to beat some teams that were thought of very highly coming into the season. Now, they do finish with the 4th best record in the conference in the Big Ten, and Michigan beat both of the teams ahead of them. That's Penn State and that's Ohio State. Michigan, strength, defense. They kept Ohio State 21.5 points under average against maybe the biggest game they've had and the best offense in the Big Ten on the road. Pretty good stuff there. They shut down both the rushing and the passing offenses, so really that defense is what is going to win them games. Michigan weakness, passing offense inconsistency. For the very first time, we've seen them complete the deep ball and really just have a big impact when J.J. McCarthy throws the ball, but is he going to be able to keep doing that, and is that going to be something teams can adjust to defensively? Purdue's strength is their passing offense. 280 yards a game with 25 touchdowns. That's second and third best in the Big Ten. Purdue's weakness, though, their defense. 347 yards allowed per game, 33 touchdowns, and 23.1 points per game. All 8th in the Big Ten Conference. Winner gonna be Michigan. Don't really have to say much else. Moving right along to the Big 12, it's number 3 TCU, it's number 10 Kansas State, and again, these are teams that have faced each other in the regular season already. TCU, obviously one of the 3 undefeated teams. They've had a really good season, but that game against Kansas State, even though it did finish 38-28, it was a home game for TCU. It's a little misleading when you look at the final score. Kansas State actually led this game 28-17 at the half, including a 21-point second quarter. So it was a really big offensive explosion for them. And then that just kind of all went away in the second half. That TCU defense really stepped up and shut them out in the second half. Led by 3 in the third quarter, and then TCU scores a touchdown in the fourth quarter to win the game by 10 points. They also defeated 3 teams that aren't ranked anymore. Number 18 Oklahoma, number 19 Kansas, and number 8 Oklahoma State, all at that time, none of them ranked anymore. They also beat number 20 Texas, so you could argue that TCU is 5-0 against ranked opponents this season. Then you look at Kansas State, 9-3 on the season. All 3 of their losses came against teams that finished within the top 25. Number 18 Tulane, number 3 TCU, and number 20 Texas. The other interesting thing about Kansas State, they also defeated Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and Kansas as well. TCU's strength? Offense. 473 yards a game, 61 touchdowns scored, and 41.3 points per game for this offense. That's just really good. TCU weakness? Defense. 383 yards a game and 24.5 points per game. So they were not winning games by getting huge stops when it really matters. They were blowing teams out with their offense. Kansas State's strength. Their defense. They're second best in the Big 12 in yards allowed per game and first in touchdown and points allowed per game. Kansas State weakness, passing offense. They're last in their conference in passing yards per game. Winner, TCU. Kansas State's defense is going to be able to keep this close, but their offense is just not well-rounded enough to keep up with that high-scoring TCU. Now the conference championship most people have been waiting for, the SEC. It's number 1 Georgia and it's number 14 LSU, and obviously Georgia, the last undefeated team we haven't talked about. Their resume really speaks for themselves. They beat 3 top 25 ranked teams. That's number 16 Oregon, 7 Tennessee, and obviously number 19 South Carolina. Their average margin of victory in those games, over 33.5 points. LSU, on the other hand, is really interesting. They are the top-ranked 9-3 team this season. They were able to defeat Alabama in double overtime, the number 6 ranked team in the country. However, they lost to number 7 Tennessee. Not a close one at home, 40-13 the final in that game. They also most recently lost to Texas A&M in their last game, and in their very first game, they lost to Florida State at home. Georgia's strength? Defense. Allowing just over 11 points a game is ridiculous. 270 yards per game. That's the reason why they're the favorites this year. Georgia's weakness, if you can consider it one, rushing offense. They're just 6th in rushing yards per game within the SEC. So that's the one spot they could improve in. LSU's strength is they have a solid defense and offense at the same time. You really can't pinpoint one thing or the other that really isn't all that good because they are a pretty good team. Their biggest weakness, though, comes down to rushing offense, just 8th in rushing yards per game in the SEC with 191. Winner? Georgia. Really don't have to say a whole heck of a lot about it. It's the favorite to win the national championship versus the number 14th ranked team in the country. Kind of a big disparity there. This game is getting played in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, where Georgia's already played this year and won. And their defense just way too good for this offense from LSU trying to break through. Here's a look at each of my predictions. Pretty lame, I know, but again, looking through all the stats, looking at these teams, I think that's who's going to win. And that's been the biggest thing in sports this week.